Hello, I'm Otis Corbett, and today I want to share a word about the master of death as I comment on verses from John chapter 11. Let's begin by reading John 11, verses 1 through 7. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus, of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he had heard therefore that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Then after that saith he to his disciples, Let us go into Judea again. Death is something that, if the Lord tarries, we all will face. And people almost universally fear death. And in fact, there's very little difference in the way believers and non-believers feel emotionally about death. It's almost always a dreaded thing, and most of us would fight tooth and nail to keep our lives. A good example of this is a woman by the name of Jennifer Grunbeck, and her story is told in the book 9 minutes 20 seconds by a man named Gary M. Pomerantz. You see, she was a passenger on Atlantic Southeast Airlines Flight 529, which crashed in rural Carroll County, Georgia in 1995. During this crash, she was burned over 90% of her body. By all reasonable medical estimates, she had virtually no chance at all to survive. But she did. She spent 106 days in a burn unit in Chattanooga, Tennessee, undergoing some of the most painful treatments known to medicine. After she returned home to Massachusetts, she had to endure 6 hours of physical and occupational therapy a day. She fought to live, and she continued to do so. Even what she endured through all that medical treatment and pain was not as fearsome as the prospect of death. She fought hard over death. And she won over that death after that plane crash. Now, the good news for us is that we have someone to turn to who is the master of death. If we know him, we should have confidence in his care for us, even in the most difficult of times. So let's look at the work of this master as we consider the events of John chapter 11. We begin by seeing a master with a purpose. The scriptures say that a certain man got sick. Now, oftentimes when we see a certain man in the scriptures, it was a parable. It may have been a real person. It may not have been a real person. It may have been someone that Jesus was using just simply in a parable. But this was a real man that we know his name, and his name was Lazarus. This man, Lazarus, got sick. Now, getting sick is a common occurrence in the world. It's common in the developed world. It's common in the developing world. And it's very common for people to call upon those who love them when they are sick. When we are sick, we call on those who love us. And it was also in the scriptures during the Gospels very common for people to call upon Jesus to heal them or to heal their loved ones. Now, we know that Jesus did not just come to heal. He came to seek and save that which was lost. He came to be a sacrifice for many. He came to give us an abundant life. But he could heal, he would heal, and he did heal. Now, the other thing about this man is he just wasn't any certain man. Lazarus was the brother of Martha and Mary. This was a family that Jesus had much contact with. This was a family that loved Jesus and whom Jesus loved. You know, studies have shown that people can only have one or two or three intimate friends at any one time. And these were close friends to Jesus. In fact, they told Jesus that the one whom you love, not the one whom loved Jesus, but the one whom Jesus loved, was sick. So you would expect that Jesus would rush over and save Lazarus. You see, Lazarus was a friend, someone that Jesus loved. Jesus healed many, many strangers who he didn't know. So it would be logical that Jesus would rush over and do that. But Jesus is someone that you should expect the unexpected from. And Jesus deliberately delayed for a reason. It's very interesting to me. He says he loved these people, but he stayed 2 extra days. You see, what he wanted to do is use this event for a special miracle. He was not neglecting his friends, but he was wanting to honor them by showing his power in a mighty way. So he had a purpose. A missionary colleague of ours was told by a Taiwanese friend that Westerners often had it backwards. He said that you are often kind to strangers and rude to families and friends. He said, we Taiwanese are different. We are rude to strangers, but we are respectful and loving to our family and friends. Jesus, when he was ready, and no sooner, he was going to go to Bethany. Now, how did his followers react to that decision? Well, let's read John 11, verses 8 through 16. His disciple saith unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things saith he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may wake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought he had spoken of taking of rest in sleep. Then Jesus said unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. So we saw a master with purpose. Now we see a master with determination. You see, the disciples were astounded at the idea of going to Judea. Jesus had developed great resistance among the people there, and they knew there was great resistance among the people in Judea to Jesus. They were afraid this resistance was too strong for Jesus. They did not know all that we know today. They believed that Jesus would be killed, and they didn't think that Lazarus's illness was worth the risk. They thought he was just sick or just sleeping, and they were afraid of death, and they didn't think Jesus was able to do anything about that. First, they were afraid of their own death. When Lazarus was sleeping, there was no reason for them to risk death. But once Lazarus was dead, according to Jesus, why go then? Because they're risking death for a dead man. Jesus, however, persisted. He was on a mission. He knew what he was doing, and he knew what he could do. And he would not give in to doomsayers. Now, we need to have confidence in Jesus also. You see, we get scared just like the disciples did. I mean, we want to run in the other direction just like the disciples wanted to run the other direction. I mean, I just love Thomas. Well, we might as well go and die with him. Well, at least they were dedicated to him. But we need to know that we have the entire canon of Scripture available to us. We need to know that Jesus has power that was not explicitly understood by these disciples. We need to know that he has the power and the ability to help us, unlike these disciples. unlike Thomas, who was committed to Jesus and was committed to dying with him, but didn't realize that Jesus had the power of life, and he was the master over death. Sometimes God must look down on us and say to himself, "O ye of little faith." And that was what we see in the example of the disciples. And that's what we see in our own lives as well. But Jesus had a purpose, and Jesus was determined. And in his own timing, despite the protest of the disciples, Jesus went to Bethany. How was he received when he got there? Well, we'll find out as we look further in John 11, beginning in verse 17 and going through verse 27. Then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. Now, Bethany was nigh to Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off, and many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it to thee. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. And Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus saith unto him, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. Not only was that passage revealing, but so is John 11, verses 32 through 37, which reads, Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. And he said, Where have ye laid him? And they said unto him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. And then some of them said, Could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, have caused that even this man should not have died? So now we see a master with compassion. Now, naturally, Martha and Mary were upset. Martha, as was her wont, stormed out to confront Jesus. Mary stayed home and sulked. Now, both of these expressed faith in Jesus, but both of them also blamed Jesus for the death of their brother. Now, this faith was well placed, but this blame was misplaced. Sin brought illness and death into the world, not God. Lazarus, like all people, was a sinner, and frankly, all of us deserve death and hell. Jesus really, as God Almighty, did not owe them anything except that he was righteous and loving, of course, and cares for people. And also, he had a purpose in what he was doing in the first place. You see, we all need to come to God as beggars with our hats in our hands. One definition of evangelism is one poor beggar telling another poor beggar where to find bread, the bread of life. So Jesus was confronted with Mary and Martha. He was confronted by their faith, but he was also confronted by their blame. How did he react? Well, he reacted like God. He reacted with patience to Martha and with love to Mary. This is the way God reacts to us. We deserve judgment and punishment, but he shows us compassion. Like a parent of an angry child, God will do what's right, not out of anger, but out of love. And this patience, of course, that Jesus had comes out of confidence. And confidence comes out of competence. A new, unsure boss is often the harshest when it comes to dealing with subordinates because they're unsure of themselves. They're unsure of their own competence. And so they haven't had the time to develop competence yet. Jesus was both calm and competent. But the question is, was he competent enough to make a difference? Well, verses 38 through 45 tell that tale. Jesus, therefore, again groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Jesus saith unto her, Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. Because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he had thus spoken, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him and let him go. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. So we've seen a master with purpose. We've seen a master with determination. We've seen a master with compassion. But now we see a master with power. And he showed his compassion by his power. And he did this in full view of everybody concerned. In fact, he didn't whisper, Lazarus, come forth. He shouted out, Lazarus, come forth. He wanted everybody to see what he was doing. Now, what would have happened had Lazarus not come forth? Well, he would have hurt Mary and Martha beyond measure. He would have risked the life of his disciples and his own life for nothing. In Judea, which is the center of Jewish power and culture and politics, he would have been a laughingstock. His life and his ministry would have been in shreds. And we would not be reading the book of Luke today because the book of Luke would never have been written. Jesus, though, is not a one-hit wonder. He's not a washed-up actor. He's not a baseball player who signs a big contract and then has a terrible year to follow. Jesus could perform. Jesus had power. And he gave a hint of his power here. He gave a hint of the depth of his power here. He showed us here just how much he was the master of death. Lazarus was dead for 4 days. And Martha knew he was dead. Didn't want to smell the evidence. Lazarus was bound in grave clothes. And yet Jesus simply spoke, and Lazarus was revived. As many preachers have said, it's a good thing that Jesus called out Lazarus' name, or else everybody in that cemetery would have come forth. Jesus truly was competent. He was calm and he was compassionate and he was extremely competent, and he showed his mastery over death. Now that mastery is still with us today. You see, Jesus marched into the midst of those who hated him, risked the hatred of his loved ones, he risked death, and he did all this to show his power. But it really wasn't a risk because all the power was his. We read that in Matthew chapter 28 in the Great Commission. All authority is given unto Jesus. You see, there was no risk because the power was his. As they say, if you can do it, it ain't bragging. He had that power. He has that power, and it's available to us today because it doesn't change. Because Jesus doesn't change. He loves us, and he offers us access to us even now. Jesus is the master of death. And if he can control death, What is it that He can't control? What is there in our lives that He cannot be master of? If we turn to Him, we can experience His calm, compassionate competence and experience His power and His mastery in our lives. Turn to Jesus and you will see amazing things, and you will see an abundant life because He promised it to us, and He can deliver. He's the master of death and of everything else too. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon with another word from the Bible we can share together. Every blessing. I'm Dr. Otis Corbett.